Hello and welcome to another episode of Soundrise podcast. Today's episode is quite special for us because the artist we're going to talk about was chosen by our dear patrons. We ran a little poll and we had two suggestions by our dear patrons, David and Kelly. We had In Excess and Sly and the Family Stone, and this time Sly and the Family Stone won. So today we're going to talk about this famous and legendary band. Alexander, um, how are you doing today?
Hi Vlada. Hi everyone. I'm doing great. A bit tired, but looking forward to this episode. Dear patrons, thank you very much for giving us such fantastic suggestions. It was extremely difficult to pick the band, but I'm quite happy that we're doing Sly and the Family Stone. I think their music and especially their lyrics are especially important in these times. So Vlada, can you make a quick introduction about the band and obviously their importance in these times.
Thanks, Alexander. Also, dear patrons and dear listeners, if you want to participate in our polls, if you want to make suggestions, you can visit our Patreon page, and there we have special tiers for you. So, if you become our roadie with $3 a month, you may get the special voting rights. And if you become our agent for $5 a month, you get to vote. You get to suggest the artist. So if you're interested in taking part in this, check this out. For the rest of you, be free to leave any feedback or any comment, and also check out our Instagram, Patreon, and Facebook pages.
We are
So
sure,
slide.
we are sure.
Mhm.
Sorry, Vlada. We are sure that our listeners have plenty of nice bands to suggest. So, guys, go over, join the Patreon community, and give us your favorite bands that you would like us to chat about.
All right. So today, as we already said, we're talking about Sly and the Family Stone. This band was formed in 1960s in San Francisco during the peace and love era. And what's really fascinating and interesting about this band is that it was the first major American rock band to feature an integrated lineup. As the name of the band suggests, it's also a band that is partially comprised of the family members. So Sly Stone was the band's obvious leader, but he also had his brother Freddie in the band as well as his sister Rosa. The rest of the band was comprised of other great musicians such as Greg Errico, Jerry Martini, Cynthia Robinson, and the legendary bass player Larry Graham. And Larry Graham is known for one thing. He invented the so called slap bass technique.
Yes,
So,
sir.
Alexander, as a bass player, have you ever tried to slap your bass?
Yes, I have tried, but I have to say that I'm not a slap bass player. I prefer the pick and the finger style. Obviously, now I know that some people consider the picking style to be sinful or not appropriate or too much guitarish, guitar playerish. I don't know if it's
Guitaresque.
guitaresque in a way, but that's not true. We all know that you have a lot of a lot of legendary bass players that use the plectrum. But regarding Larry Graham, whether you're a bass player or not, if you're a musician, you have probably seen the legendary clip where Larry Graham explains why he came up with the idea of slapping the bass and the how. So basically, at one point, probably before he joined Sly and the Family Stone, he didn't have a drummer along with him, so he wanted to kind of compromise and create the drum sound using the bass. So he wanted to have the sound of the kick drum and the snare drum. So that's how the slap technique came to this world, and as you all guys know, it is absolutely iconic. Everybody recognizes it when listening to music, and I have to also say that it's not just funk music that where you can hear the slap bass technique. You can also hear it in other genres, such as, for example, nu metal. I know, Vlada, that you don't like it, but um,
All right.
it's, yeah, I know it's not one of your favorite types of music, obviously. But for example, one of the most well-known new metal bands, Korn, their bassist tends to slap his bass guitar, and to be fair, he does it pretty in a pretty cool way. So it's very versatile, and as you guys know, it just simply makes you dance. So thank you, Larry Graham.
All right. So this band, besides having fantastic instrumentalists, was really influential for the development of soul, funk, and R&B music. And I feel that they are kind of overlooked nowadays because if you look at the most important, the most major funk R&B artists, let's say Prince or maybe some even hip hop artists like Outkast, you can notice a very clear influence that these guys had on all these different major acts that followed them. So
Funkadelic.
funkadelic among other things, you know. So we're talking about a very major artist, very major band that shaped the modern R&B music as we know it, that shaped the modern funk music. Their message was all about peace and love, and it was also very politically charged. So they were not just the first racially integrated band, but they also had a lot of things to say about it. And they mostly did it through this very positive anti-racist vibe that they always exhibited in their work. But we will go through different records here, and you will see how their records evolved over the years, and also how their message became more and more prominent. One might say. So, without further ado, let's move on to the first record today, and that's their third album, Life. So, Alexander, what can you tell me? What kind of impression did this record leave on you?
Quite a positive impression, Vlada. I really liked the musicianship here. I think the music was absolutely brilliant, especially the first couple of tracks. You know, the first track, Dynamite. Basically, the title of that track says it all. The rhythm section is out of this world. I will say that this album is slightly inconsistent, especially the side two of this album. For some reason, side two is kind of in and out. You know, it's not that every track is a masterpiece, but overall the whole album sounds pretty good. What I like about it is um, the joking lyrics, which you can find, for example, in the track Chicken, and at the same time that's one of my favorite tracks here. But apart from the lyrics, where I would like to point out the musicianship is with the track Love City, because there's a part in that song where they sing and play the drums, you know, no other instruments, and the drumming is fantastic. It's so contagious and so fast paced, really influential, really I don't know. I get goosebumps when I listen to it. So overall, for me, a very good record. What about you, Vlada?
Well, you made some really good points here. I would say that this record didn't leave such a great impression on me as the other two that we're going to talk about. Other than that, I do think that it's a quality album, that it's very consistent throughout. Basically, the way I hear it is there's a lot of funky jams. The songs are kind of more sketches than songs, than fully realized songs, but they're still very fun to listen to, and they're very upbeat. You know, they have this ability to get you moving. And when it comes to that kind of stuff, this band was probably at their time unmatched. I'm not sure which track I would single out because everything kind of blends together for me. But Plastic Jim, I really liked that one. I remember that one leaving an impression on me. The words, the lyrics are very quirky, not just in that song, but throughout the record. And I kind of like that free spirit, that sort of fun, joyous quality that this album possesses. I'm not sure this is the best place to start with the band. If you were to start listening to Sly and the Family Stone, I think this would not be the greatest starting point. But I think it's definitely a record that you have to listen to after you check out the ones that I personally think are a good starting place.
Good points, Vlada. Yeah. So, shall we now do the ratings for this album, Vlada?
Of course, yes. So let me hear you. What's your take?
Um, as you guys know, it's always difficult to give a precise rating. It's always, subject to changes and let's say it's tentative. So for now, I will give it an 8 out of 10, Vlada.
Okay, that's a very good rating. I will give it 7.5 because I think this is a really good record. There aren't many flaws, but what I really miss are major songs. And this band proved to me later on that they are more than capable of having major songs. So here it's 7.5, but I also feel that this record has the potential to grow on me. So this rating might change over time. This is one of the reasons why I generally don't like giving ratings, but we want to have some kind of scale just to let you guys um, be able to understand where we're coming from when we rate records, right?
We want to give
So
you guys the chance to either praise us or attack us.
yes, maybe some of you think that this is their best record, and you might not like our comments. So we really want to hear from you, whether you like our comments or not. We really enjoy getting your feedback, hearing your thoughts about these albums. So please be free to contact us or leave comments on our pages. All right, so the next record following this one is called Stand. Stand with the exclamation mark. So very straightforward, but also a very political message, understanding the context of the times. And we see that in some ways it's still applicable, right? So, Alexander, what about this one?
As you said, it's quite political and it sends a strong message. The whole album is very in your face, both music wise and lyrics wise as well. Um, I don't find this album for now. I kind of don't find it as a huge upgrade compared to the previous record, but it's still very good. And again, I'm not sure if this is some kind of pattern, but the first couple of tracks absolutely leave you speechless. Both the music and the lyrics, especially this kind of sending a message using very simple sentences. They really want to keep it simple and understandable. That's what I like. It's kind of, let's say, it's kind of punky. It's not some witty, hard to understand stuff. It's really straightforward and followed by great musicians. As I said, the rhythm section is fantastic, and also let's not forget the vocals. Sly Stone is a very good vocalist, but when they all sing together, it's even better. So that just shows you how talented this bunch were. Did you have the same impression, Vlada, when it comes to their vocals?
Oh yeah, yeah. The vocals are one of their strong suits. Even though I mean this band doesn't quite have any flaws instrumentally or vocally speaking. That's one of the fascinating things about them. Like everything is so perfectly aligned, and it's such a joy listening to them. And I
You
think
can
with
sense
this
the
record,
chemistry. You can
yes, the
sense.
chemistry, which is something very characteristic of the bands that include family members. I think there's something about it. Like, guys, can you perhaps give us some of your examples of the artists of the family members that work together? That would be interesting to talk about as well. So yeah, they have that special chemistry, but what I think is a major step forward on this record is that they finally found their voice, that the songwriting, uh, the craft, the craft of the songs is there. Like, the songs are much more immediate, much more in your face, much more hook filled. They're catchier. They instantly grab your attention. They're very poppy and yet funky and soulful at the same time. And this is where they move forward, I think. Also, the political undertones are much more obvious here than on the previous record, especially the second track, uh, with its infamous use of racial slurs, uh, and it has such a positive message against racism, such a positive message that we should all get together, that we should all celebrate life and not uh, discriminate against others who don't look like us. This is, I think, also one of the songs that really epitomize the vibe and the overall message that this band was trying to convey. So, Alexander, what's your take on this tune and the political undertones or overtones of this record?
Well, to be fair, right from the beginning of this song, I could hear and I could understand quite well the message. It's really simple. The lyrics consist of basically two sentences, but the song is 6 minutes long. There's a lot of improvisation. That's what I quite like about this band. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong. I know that you're a big fan of the '60s, but is it typical of of the bands that were active in the '60s to be really into jamming? When we talked about Jefferson
Yeah,
Airplane.
most definitely, especially the San Francisco scene, right?
Yes, like we mentioned, Jefferson Airplane. They are also a psychedelic rock band from San Francisco. They were also active in the '60s, and they were really into improvisations and jamming, and they were established as a live act. And I think the same thing applies to Sly and the Family Stone. So the second track here is one of my favorites, definitely. And dear listeners, you won't have any issues understanding the message of it, and I really urge you um, to stick to it and use it as your, I don't know, your life quote, so to say.
Yes, so this song is one of those anti racist anthems of the 60s. Um, so please check it out. Also, I would like to single out another song that I truly fell in love with. The song is called Everyday People, and I originally heard it in the film Milk, which was about the famous LGBT activist Harvey Milk. The story of this film was set in San Francisco in the 70s, and in one of the scenes, you can hear the song Everyday People, and just remember being blown away by the song when I first heard it. Very catchy, short pop tune with some amazing vocals by Sly Stone. I especially like the way where he emphasizes some parts vocally. The vocal dynamics are just fantastic. It's just so beautiful. It's just so uplifting. And this is another thing that this band does so well, that they're capable of being uplifting without ever sounding corny, but without ever sounding cheesy. And I think that's a major feat.
Exactly, Vlada. I just want to add one more thing about the second track. For some reason, the melody of this of this song really reminds me of Funkadelic. I'm a big fan of Funkadelic. They are a fantastic band. Really something that I'm looking for when I have the need to listen to funk music. So the influences are obvious, and this is probably one of the most influential um, funk bands ever. And there's another track here called Sex Machine. So I think there is another song, also a funk song with the same title, Vlada.
Oh yeah, the famous James Brown song, Sex Machine. But this Sex Machine here is more of a jam than a song. So it's an instrumental, 13 minutes of this band jamming, and it's really fascinating to hear them jam because they sound so in sync when they do it. However, I think that this song disrupts the flow of the record. If it was a bit shorter, then it would be okay. But one has to bear in mind that the bands in the 60s were under a tremendous pressure to deliver albums year after year. And I guess sometimes they just needed to fill out the time. So perhaps it's better to do it this way than including some kind of meaningless filler song.
There you go. So let's pick our favorite tracks and do the notorious ratings, Vlada. My favorite track is the first one called "Stand," the title track, and the opening track at the same time. Um, the message is clear and obvious and very understandable. Absolutely um, applicable to the events that we're witnessing these days. So that's my standout track, and my rating is um, slightly higher than the rating for the previous album. So that's gonna be 8.5 out of 10, Vlada.
All right, I have to say I agree with this rating. So it's 8.5. Definitely a classic record, very consistent throughout. As he said, the band really came into their own here. The songs are very strong right from the get go. The title track, very melodic, very catchy. Several other wonderful songs. My personal highlight is Everyday People, but there's so much more to this album other than that. So definitely this might be a really good starting point for somebody digging into this band for the first time. I would advise them to check out this record first. If they like it, then it means Sly and the Family Stone is the band for them. So 8.5 on my behalf.
Nice one,
All
Vlada.
right. All right. So we have one more record with a very political title. Now, the previous title was political, I think, but this one speaks for itself. There's a riot going on. Again, something applicable to these times. Unfortunately, as we see, dear listeners, in the 21st century, we're still dealing with the issues of racism. And we can only hope that eventually we will eradicate this illness, this social illness, right? So there's a riot going on. The band here is moving in another direction, I think. Now they move away from that positive hippie vibe into darker realms. So this is a very dark funk record, and it sounds beautiful as such. Uh, Alexander, would you agree with this?
Um, not, not. I'm not as impressed as you are. For some reason, maybe I need to give this one another shot. For me, um, it's slightly worse compared to the previous two albums. Um, the big positive here is the album cover. I really like it, whether it's in its original colors, because there's a version of the album cover with original U.S. Colors, and there's also a version where it's all in black and white. But overall, I like the flag themed cover. And is there any kind of background story, or was it just meant to symbolize the politics? Because as we know, like Jefferson Airplane, most of their album covers, or at least those that we covered, that we talked about, they all feature those American flaggy elements. So, is it the same thing, or is there something else to it, Vlada?
Well, Sly Stone said it himself that this was his idea, his concept. So what we have here is a slightly altered American flag with the black color instead of blue and with suns instead of stars. So Sly explained that he wanted to feature three colors: red for the color of blood that's in everybody's veins that flows through all human beings, then white as the unification of all colors. So all colors are represented by the white color, and then the black color as the absence of color. That was his explanation. And then the most important part, I think, is the suns. He said that basically stars represent something that we strive to reach uh, throughout our lives, but the sun is something that's always there, that we always benefit from. So I guess one can say that it's all about enjoying the world as it is and seeing the best in people. You know, there's a very humane message behind this album cover, but I also think it's very politically charged, especially given that they alter the American flag. Some people might find something like that radical or even offensive, especially if they're conservative. And it might also symbolize some kind of political change that they want to see in the USA. So in that sense, I think this is a perfect album cover, especially considering the political climate of those times. But even today, we see we can find this more or less applicable.
Oh, I love the idea behind the album artwork. Vlada, thanks a lot for that explanation. What I want to ask you is about the length of this album, because it is clearly longer than both Stand and Life. So this is also an album from the 1970s. It was released in 1971. So is there any reason behind that, Vlada? That they decided to release a longer album? As we know, um, albums, music albums in the 50s and in the 60s weren't that long, like 30 to 40 minutes, and this one is close to being a 50 minutes long album, Vlada.
Well, I think that first of all, I think that at that point, and this is just my theory, I'm not quite sure if that's correct. They probably had more artistic freedom and less pressure by the label, so they could sort of refine their music and include all their ideas. They weren't in the rush like with the previous album, which you can tell was a bit rushed despite being amazing. So that might be one of the reasons. I think this album, while Stand was more kind of, you can say, singles oriented, because a lot of songs on Stand could be standalone singles, this album seems more unified. It seems to have more of a concept going on. Just the whole mood of it, the mood, this dark, edgy mood. You know, it's very edgy. It's very in its way. It's radical because it turns these very positive, uplifting beats into something much much more cynical. And also the lyrics are such as well. You can tell by certain songs.
Yeah.
For example, one of my favorites is the song "Time," which sounds very poignant, very wistful. There is some kind of melancholy in it. There is some kind of sadness and resignation, which was also beautifully performed by Sly Stone. Um, there's the title track, which is one long jam, but unlike Sex Machine, that kind of meandered a bit. This jam seems to be much more intense, you know. So I relate it all to the political message of the record. It was also like the early 70s, the time when there was a lot of disappointment with this whole peace and love movement, and that uh, the sound of this record reflects that perfectly.
Yep, yep. That's true, Vlada. Um, what I don't like about this album, so my complaint about this record is that I kind of found the production quality to be slightly disappointing. I thought the drum cymbals kind of sounded a bit low. I don't know why, especially given the fact that their rhythm section is wicked and fantastic. So I didn't find the quality, even though it's the same label, you know. Um, I you know they issued all these records that we're talking about under the same label, but for some reason the audio quality isn't just as good um, with this one compared to the previous two. Um, Lada,
I
does
don't
it?
know.
Yeah.
I think it might be deliberate. I think this album just has a different sound to it. So for me, um, to me, it sounds the same. Like not the same, but it sounds perfectly fine. You know, I don't see any flaws with its sound. So I think I disagree with you on that. Perhaps it was a deliberate decision to have a different sound for this.
Yes, I don't get why would you tone down the drums. I mean that's really not the point. And dear listeners, if there are any musicians out there listening to this episode now, you all know that when you're in a music studio, the drums are undoubtedly the loudest instrument, and you love that, especially if you're a crazy bassist that loves the connection with the drummer. But regarding the instruments, Vlada, does it surprise you that one of the musicians that was featured on this record was Ike Turner? Does that surprise you?
Not really, to be fair. I mean, it is a great addition to this album. But I think Ike Turner at that time was a highly influential R&B musician, a blues musician, and basically a veteran. So these guys probably looked up to him. He was older than them. He had a great act of his own, going strong at the time. Ike and Tina Turner. So I don't know. I think they're very much from the same musical world, so that doesn't come as a shock.
Fair enough, Vlada. So let's conclude this album with our ratings and our favorite songs. So, Vlada, what are you saying?
I would say it's hard to choose the best song because they are all so damn good. Several highlights for me, just like a baby. Um Also, there's a riot going on, a fantastic jam, and time, a beautiful ballad. So maybe time, for the time being, is my favorite. But I feel like there's so much to discover on this record, so I will keep listening to this one and see how it evolves and how I perceive this record later on.
So you are basically urging our listeners to listen to this album from A to Z.
Yes, and I would give it the rating of 9 because I think it's an album
Ooh.
absolutely deserving of its classic status. Please check it out. It's a great funk record. It's a great soul record. Um, it's very dark. So if you don't like that kind of, if you're a very cynical person and you're not really into this sort of uh, jovial style that they had early on, this record might be for you.
Okay. My standout track is the opening one, Love and Hate, spelled in a very interesting way, not typical, not according to the rules. So that's my favorite. It's very punchy and in your face right from the get go. I guess that's typical of this band, and obviously that's a great feature and always a positive from my perspective. Okay, Vlada, we are now approaching the end of this episode. Dear listeners, this is our 11th episode, and we wanted last week we wanted to celebrate recording our first 10 episodes, so we decided to give you our top 10 lists. The first top 10 lists, the first top 10 list was about our favorite album covers, and the second one was a minisode where we talked about our 10 episodes. We ranked them from 1 to 10. So we hope that you liked that you liked some bit of bonus content. And as always, we're very thankful for our patrons. They are absolutely brilliant. And Vlada, would you like to give them a shout out?
Yes, dear patrons, thank you so much for being there for us. Without you, we wouldn't quite make it. So we really appreciate all your help and support. Dear listeners, we also appreciate you listening to us, and we can't wait to hear more from you. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can go and visit our Patreon page for Soundrise Podcast. Take a look at our special membership tiers. A huge shout out to all our current patrons: Asha, Stephanie, Kelly, David, Andriana, Stefan, and Yanko. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much. Um, so, uh, with this, we will wrap up this episode. We had some extra content, as Alexander mentioned, for our 10th episode. So, please make sure you visit our Facebook page and our Instagram page where you can keep up with all the news regarding the podcast. And we have some nice new surprises in store for you, hopefully. So stay tuned.
That's right. Stay safe, everybody, and see you in a week.